The flames. History's greatest secret and key to a future where ships travel lifetimes to bring flames to new worlds. Those who dare to walk the fire can cross between the stars with a step if you can find a ferryman and pay your way across. For most who brave the flame alone are lost forever. May the ferryman take you. Sterile Oceans Part 2. Story by Harry Connelly. Narration by Tobias Queen.
Her skin was dusky, closer in shade to Roscoe's than Emerald's, and her hair had been cropped to a brush top. This was no child. This was fairy folk. She didn't speak. She only looked Roscoe over briefly, as though she could size him up and dismiss him at a glance. He didn't like being dismissed. Nut? The fairy folk cocked her head as though he'd insulted her, but he picked up the little bowl and rattled the nuts within as he offered it to her. "Thank you," she said, but no. Her voice was low and thin, without any of the nervous energy of girls her age. Girls who appeared to be her age. He set the nuts aside. "Where's the regular guy? This delivery is late. We're almost out of supplies." She let her backpack slide to the ground, then shut off the lifter supporting it. "If you haven't run out of supplies, we aren't late," she said. "As for the regular guy, I couldn't tell you. He's not here because he isn't here." That was about as much explanation as he could expect from fairy folk. "What have you brought us?" She unsnapped the pack and dropped the roller ramp. 1 block hyperdense nutrient components. She rolled a long gray block of hydrocarbons out onto the chamber deck. Yum. 1 block polymer components. This one was smaller and almost white in color. Probably just as yum. 1 set of data sticks with firmware, software, and motionware upgrades and updates. This was a little metal case that she set on top of the nutrient block. Finally, 2, well, I guess these are care parcels from home? With personal messages and mediaware for your slates. Are you Roscoe or Emerald? Emerald's parcel was a tiny little thing, carelessly wrapped and sealed. Roscoe's was the same rigid, shielded wrap his family always sent. They would have been too embarrassed to post something as sloppy as Emerald's, but then his family was poor enough that it mattered. The temptation to snatch the box out of the little girl's hands was powerful. "Let me sign." She tucked his parcel under her arm and offered her slate. He pressed his thumbprint in the proper spot, noting that the girl's name was right there on screen. Naoma. Glancing at the readout, Naoma said, "That entitles you to 1 item only, a box from Grandma MPPM." She held it out. He accepted as casually as he could manage. "What do the letters stand for?" Roscoe wasn't sure what that question meant. The letters inside his parcel? Before he could ask, Emerald rushed into the room. "Sorry for the delay. I had to package some—" "You're not our guy." "I'm not anyone's guy." The fairy folk offered the slate to Emerald. 1 press of her thumbprint and the polymers, nutrient block, data sticks, and second care parcel were here to stay. Roscoe wanted to take his parcel directly to his quarters, but he didn't want to be seen taking it directly there. "Would you like a tour?" "Roscoe, sweetie," Emerald said in a slightly chiding way. "I should give the tour. You put the blocks and the sticks where they belong." To Naoma, she said, "It's a really small facility. 6 chambers, but 2 are private. Would you like to see what we do here?" "Sure." Roscoe slid the little case into his pocket and wheeled both blocks into the kitchen. The others followed, Emerald chatting happily about how the kitchen worked and how it broke down the nutrients and reconstructed them into simulated leaves or meats. The nutrient block was still not in place when they moved on to the lab, but Roscoe was glad to see them go. Emerald's attitude unnerved him. After hundreds of days, she'd become comfortable with the regular guy. Now that they had new fairy folk paying them a call, she'd returned to eager underling mode. "The girl is just a courier," he wanted to shout, but Emerald wouldn't understand. To her, fairy folk were important, elite. Therefore, they were to be treated with deference, as though they were superiors who controlled her funding. The tour had already left the lab when he delivered the polymer block and the case of data sticks. Then he walked calmly into his room and slid the parcel under his bed. On the way out of his room, he laid his index finger on the jar of decorative crystals at the back of his dresser. Soon. Maybe. Emerald and Naoma were finishing the tour in the switching room. Roscoe loitered in the doorway. "The pods are designed to use the water pressure," Emerald explained, "to fold polymers in ways that can't be duplicated in other places, at least not without a massive expenditure of unrecoverable energy. In fact, the whole place is powered by the weight of the ocean above us. This transparent dome is being slowly compressed, and that's what keeps the lights on, the kitchen cooking, and the lab equipment running." "So you make unusual polymers?" It was hard to tell how much Naoma understood. She looked so young, and fairy folk were not well known for pursuing rigorous science. Roscoe probably knew more about polymers than she did. "Seed polymers, yes. We can do it cheaply down here and then put them in a resin vat, attach them to a solar collector on the station, and make all sorts of things, from medical equipment to heavy shielding suits. But I'm also working on my own formulations to create a new kind of polymer. If I can get it working to satisfaction, Do you know anything about the second planet in this system?" "I'm afraid I don't." "It's your basic hellhole of corrosive storms. In that atmosphere, the most advanced materials we have only last for 100 days, give or take, which is okay for chemical mining, but not for permanent settlements. I think they're possible, and they would be even more profitable than the atmospheric dragging we do now. Even better, moving people off the station means we could ease some of the childbirth restrictions on the laboring classes. They could have big families if they wanted." Naoma looked up at Emerald and, for the first time, Roscoe thought she showed a glimmer of interest. "You want to help people?" "I want to be affluential beyond my wildest dreams," Emerald gushed. "If I can make this project a success, my name would be on 1,000 lips and 10,000 screens. I'd become the most affluential member of my family for 10,000 days. There's a little house in a distant wing of the station, near an orange orchard I've had my eye on for years. The smell of oranges is very good for the creative mind. Best of all, I designed all of this on my own. All on my own." But Roscoe could see Naoma had already soured on this conversation. Before she could respond, another groan echoed out of the pitch-dark depths. They were silent for a few moments, staring up through the transparent dome as if a gigantic alien face might appear at any moment. The thought gave Roscoe shivers. "That sounded like whale song," Naoma said. "There are no whales here," Roscoe answered, feeling smug about recognizing the creature she mentioned. "It's a dead ocean, sterile. There isn't even bacteria growing out there." "To me, it sounds like thermal venting," Emerald insisted. "Maybe geologic settling. Maybe something else. Fluid dynamics isn't my field." "There's always more to learn," Naoma said. "Thank you for the tour, Emerald. Do you have the materials I'm supposed to take back?" Yes, the moneymakers. We just finished some new today, so I'll have to add them to the pack. Just a moment. Emerald hurried out of the room. Naoma glanced at him. She looked just as slender and fragile as before, but suddenly she didn't look especially young. What do the letters at the end of your grandmother's signature stand for? Is it a code? Is that what she'd meant? No, of course not. And she's not really you'd probably call her my great-great-great-grandmother? Don't you have a way to keep track of your extended family? The fairy folk's expression went flat. She didn't like that question. It's almost sleep cycle, Roscoe said, persevering anyway. Would you like to stay for a few hours in my room? Come on, Roscoe, was all she said, as though she was disappointed in him. Come on. It won't be a waste of time. I don't know if fairy folk get much chance to relax, but... She lifted her right hand, flexed her wrist, and turned it over, exposing a slender tube strapped to her inner forearm, which she pointed directly at Roscoe. You don't seem to know anything about us. Do you know what happens to fairy folk who are forced to kill a local? Roscoe was unsure what to say. You get sent to scan court? Nope. Twice in the last 50 years, I've had to shoot someone who wouldn't hear my no. And both times the local authorities paid me compensation. I didn't have to answer a single question. Your boss might think she understands what makes someone affluential, but she doesn't. I was only asking. There are still places where offers like yours come with a bunch of messy strings attached. Will you accept my refusal, or am I going to have to shoot you? Roscoe stared at her, unsure what to say. Is it such a difficult decision? I'm not sure if murder is covered by my insurance policy. You took out insurance? Emerald stood in the doorway, a lifter full of standard polymer packages in her arms. She did not look happy. Roscoe cursed himself inwardly. She must have packed those polymers in record time. That or he'd dawdled with the fairy folk longer than he'd thought. Still, he should have kept his mouth shut, no matter what Naoma said. But no, he'd crumbled like a weakling, just because she'd flashed a tube at him. Just a tube. Was it even a real gun? Something wrong with insurance? He doesn't need it. You don't need it, sweetie. If something happened to us down here, I would have gotten you a tube reviv. I mean, obviously, front of the line. Why would you need insurance? They were both looking at him. To his own horror, he found himself answering her. I'm not a candidate for reviv. I'm faulty. Emerald gaped at him. I'm dying. Emerald's voice was quiet. What the fuck is that supposed to mean?
Walk the Fire by John Miro. Learn more at servingworlds.com. Theme music, Full On by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com.